Today is International Design Day, a global initiative established in 1995 by the International Council of Design, which is also known as ICoD, and it's celebrated every April 27th and dedicated to making the case for design's essential role in society, culture, and human experience. Each year, ICoD invites a member organization to host the day and shape its theme. In 2026, that honor belongs to SEGD, the Society for Experiential Graphic Design. This year's theme is entitled The Spaces in Between, and it's an invitation to look beyond what we make and more towards the moments where design quietly shapes how people relate to one another, the thresholds, the transitions, the shared territories that we encounter each other, and where meaning is made or sometimes missed. The conversations you're about to hear come from designers and leaders whose work lives in exactly these spaces. I'm Cybelle Jones, CEO of SEGD, and today I'm very, very, very excited to introduce someone that I admire greatly, and I'm so appreciative and honored to work alongside every week in my role leading the organization. And that is Aki Carpenter. She's president of the SEGD board of directors. And in that role, she's actually helped shape not just our organization, but the very theme that we're going to be talking about today. And she brings to everything she does a combination of creative rigor, care, compassion, and genuine warmth that I find endlessly inspiring and always need more of in my life. So please welcome my colleague, collaborator, and one of the most important voices in experience design today.
Yes, thank you so much, Cybelle, for having me. I mean, what a generous and kind intro. Thank you so much. We're definitely in a mutual appreciation society together, and I always love being in conversation with you about design and connection, and this is really such a treat. So thank you.
So thinking about the theme, the spaces in between, I wanted to ask you, as a designer first, so you've spent your career building spaces that can really tell very challenging histories. And when you sit with the theme of the spaces in between, what does it mean to you through the lens of the work that you actually design and make?
The theme. So I think when I think about the spaces in between, I'm not thinking about it so much as the metaphor, really just thinking about it as something really real in the work that we do. So much of what we design is not about the object or even the stories on the walls. It's about what happens in those gaps, in those moments in between, when someone might pause or turn to the person that's next to them or with them, or even just decide to linger a little bit longer in that space. And in, I would say, museums especially, we're often designing for and interpreting histories, as you say, that are difficult or unresolved, and often deeply emotional. And you can't design those experiences as calcified, fixed narratives in order for them to really land and resonate with visitors. So I think what matters is creating those conditions where people can process and connect and even sometimes disagree together. And at RAA, we're always talking about what that means, what it means to learn in public. And I really do think it's those in-between moments where that interaction happens. For example, at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, I often get asked what my favorite design moment is in that project. And it's really not about the design for me exactly. It's about seeing people in the space, kind of engaging in conversation as they move between the stories. That's our sort of intergenerational dialogue. And those in-design spaces might look really simple. It might just be a change in lighting, or a quiet moment after a more intense experience. And I think those smaller but important moments are doing a lot of work where empathy sort of has room to form or grow, where reflection can happen, where someone really moves from kind of consuming or receiving information into actually making meaning of it, learning from it. And I think that's where real impact can happen, not just where, what we're telling people or what they're perceiving, but how and what they, sort of begin to understand for themselves and how they share it with others in conversation.
I'm having memories of how many times I've been through the African American Museum at the Smithsonian. And I think the first 3 times I visited, I'd never made it past the lower floors. And for those of you that haven't been there, you actually start at the lowest level underneath the ground and you transcend upwards until the final gallery is on a top floor with a stupendous view of the National Mall, and it's daylit and it's celebratory, and it talks about themes and music and sports and things. But yeah, my first 3 times I didn't make it that far because I was so, entranced with the history narrative, and it's quite emotional. So as you're saying, as lighting shifts, as you begin to transition or transcend upwards, those cues are really meaningful in that experience.
Yeah,
And how you process, right? How you process all of this information.
Yeah, I'm always sort of telling people it's so important. I know it's almost impossible to make it through, that amount of square footage and information and emotion in one day, but it is really important to try to ascend to the top, like kind of for your soul to get
Yeah.
to that community floor. And it's interesting because, there isn't sort of a clear signage saying you must start in the bottom and you should rise. Like, we
Right.
definitely envision that visitor journey as being rooted in history, embraced by community, and then to celebrate culture on the top level. But people just seem to know it through word of mouth, and it's just really fascinating how people are trying to experience it in the way we had hoped.
And people make a pilgrimage. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really that kind of a destination. So I'm sure you're very proud. And I know it was a labor of love, very long process to
Very,
develop that, right?
yeah, and took a village. I know that's an overused phrase, but
Yeah.
I can't express how many people, and yeah, near and dear to my heart, always will be.
That being said, too, I'm sure for the Obama Library that'll be opening on Juneteenth in Chicago. So thinking about the kinds of spaces that you're working in, as we're saying, like they might be asking people or conjuring up in people feelings that they haven't felt before, maybe necessarily to that content or in a museum environment, whether that's grief or pride or recognition or responsibility or hope. How do you design for what happens in those thresholds? The moment maybe before a person enters, like providing context because they're, coming in from whatever is happening in their day, and actually the moment after they leave when they're still carrying what they experienced. Like, does that come into your design process? Because I know it's not the physical space that you're designing.
I mean, absolutely. I think we talk a lot about, well, all the thresholds. I think there's like a whole hierarchy of kind of thresholds throughout the story with that's sort of mapped in the architecture as well. But we actually talk a lot about that first and last threshold quite a bit, just because they can be some of the most charged moments in the whole experience. That kind of transition from the outside world into the space and then back out again. They're just really important bookends to the overall journey for our visitors, and the overall spatial quality shift, and I think the emotions shift with them. That's the hope, at least. And we're touching a lot on my projects and RA's projects that are difficult, complex history. And, for those projects before entry, there's often anticipation or even hesitation, whether you have kind of a connection to that subject matter or you're really unaware and you know that you are unaware. So I think especially with those complex histories, people arrive with like different levels of readiness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, we're working on the American LGBTQ plus museum that will be in New York. And we've been talking a lot with the client and stakeholders about how do we create a transition at the beginning that really allows people to, let their shoulders down. How do we try to design this threshold as kind of a recalibration, hopefully signaling that you can enter on your own terms. And I think that's a lot of our goals when we're thinking about our projects. And, I think the exit is the inverse, but in some ways even more important because you're often moving through rich but heavy and emotional content and experiences that might be transporting you through time or, really activating your imagination. And then suddenly you're like ripped back into the real world. You're like shifting right back into the buzz of everyday life. And I think if that shift is, too abrupt, the whole experience can kind of fall away or it can feel really jarring. Um, so we're thinking about like kind of that bridge between what someone has felt and then the world they're stepping back into, because I think the goal isn't just what happens inside the exhibits.
Yeah.
We're never just thinking inside that box. It's what people take away with them. and, I think really importantly, what they take into their lives.
Yeah, and oftentimes we try to have a call to action or something that, they can carry or have a conversation about. And we don't talk about that enough, like the spaces that are happening afterwards, right? Where people are. And if you go with a group, like if you're going with family members or you're going with friends or, that kind of what sparks the continuation of the journey that you had.
Yeah.
So I know you love, well, number one, you have to travel for work, but you do enjoy it. And, you outside of work, you have been a lot of different places around the world, but where can you think of that you felt most completely held by the design in this space? Like, where did someone get that in between exactly right? And I'm sure there's multiple, but maybe just like one example that resonated with you.
I think with this question, I immediately sort of started thinking about the Venice Biennale, which I love and I try to go to every year if I can, because I think it's such an interesting sort of snapshot of what people are thinking about and talking about. And, there are these pavilions where you're sort of moving in between these different sort of like thought pockets. You're kind of reflecting on that theme as you move between those pavilions. But I think one maybe that really stuck with me was I think it was the 2024 Biennale, and it was the Australia Pavilion. Archie Moore's, I think it was called Kith and Kin. And when you walked in, it was quite dark. And so you had to sort of pause to let your eyes adjust. And like, that is a transition that sort of stops you in your track in some way, because you kind of can't go further until you're able to sort of see and understand the space. And then when you can, you start seeing these kind of white lines everywhere across the walls, across the ceiling. And this whole entire space is covered in this hand-drawn genealogical map that's
Mm,
really tracing the artist, his indigenous lineage, over something like, I think it's like 65,000 years.
wow.
And there's no set path. You're kind of just like moving through it. You're following these names, these lines and connections. And there's also this central memorial element that really kind of grounds the space and reminds you that like, you're not just like in a data visualization, this is like lived and ongoing and really
Mm,
real. And so I think what the in between there in that example is that kind of tension between the intimacy and the vastness of what that space is trying to tell. You're sort of looking at his family tree, which is deeply personal, but it's like expanding into this much more of a collective. Like, it's not just one lineage, it's also about all of us. So I think that's sort of the space in between, that space when you're kind of moving between understanding something personal and recognizing a connection to something, so much larger than you.
for some reason that made me think of the Laurie Anderson room that there was a Laurie Anderson exhibition at the Hirshhorn in DC. And when it came down, they kept this one room that she like literally painted, illustrated the floor and the walls. And every time I go, I see something new, right? And there's whimsy in it and there's seriousness, and just it allows the visitor to experience their own thing, right? Depending on what they're drawn to and where they find themselves in the space. Well, thinking about, I mean, that's specifically talking about a space that an artist created to tell a story that's, actually connected to them and to their history, their personal history. So when we think about who gets to lead these spaces and in the design profession, it seems like that really makes a difference when you're trying to tell these like varied perspectives and views. And I know that you really make a point over the course of your career to changing not just what's represented in cultural spaces, but who gets to lead them, the development of that, and what difference that actually will make in the work itself. So what gets designed differently, or what is the end result when people making the decisions have a different relationship to that story being told?
Yeah, you know me well. I've spent a lot of time thinking about not just the how and the what, but the who.
Right.
I do really believe that this sort of approach to kind of orchestrating or building a team and thinking about really who's making these projects changes the work, honestly, in really fundamental ways. For me, it really comes down to like not just inviting people to the table, but building bigger tables with lots of seats. And hopefully those people are bringing more people to the table. And I think it really gives with the intention of ensuring people have real ways of contributing to shaping the project, not just as advisors, but real contributor, giving feedback and ideas to like the formative stages of the project, thinking about feedback and insights that can really pivot the design and the solutions deeper than something surface level.
Yeah.
And I think when people have a relationship or a different relationship to the story, the questions are different that we're talking about, and what gets prioritized can shift, and assumptions can get challenged, and some things are cared for more or, kind of differently. And I think that process results in an experience that just resonates more. It feels more honest. I think audiences can kind of sense that it's coming from a place that's been shaped by many perspectives, not just one. I think a project that comes to mind is the International African American Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. That project was in our office for, probably over 20 years. And so, these projects, but,
Yeah.
it's sort of like a
They ebb and flow with
and it went through a lot of
fundraising and everything else.
fundraising and just, it's also South Carolina. Like, I grew up there. This is not a place that this story is told. So it went through all kinds of leadership changes, both on the project side and REA's side. And, but, I think what it resulted in, if you were go there today, is like, you really can feel that in like kind of the best ways. Like, it almost feels like a potluck, like it's so layered and rich. And I think being trained as a designer, you're sort of trained in that Bauhaus mentality, and, every white space is sort of used, but it's kind of really special and sort of messy and wonderful in all these cool ways. So I think it can be surprising when you really kind of let the voices sort of lead the way. Of course, you need kind of strong vision, strong leadership. Like, it doesn't mean that it's more complicated necessary. It just, leadership is important. I guess the last thing I would say is it's important to say that, this isn't a perfect process. I think, all the iterations we've done over the decades at this point is, we improve every time, I hope, and we learn from every iteration. And yeah, I'm just really, really thankful for people trusting us to tell these amazing stories and to really think about how we do it.
Yeah. And I love seeing that there's like a project in a place like South Carolina. I live in Washington, D.C., and we have so many museums, and I just want to see more museums in other parts of the country and the world. And, I did a lot of work in Mississippi, and I wanted those projects to feel and look like the communities that they were in, not like something that was designed in the Northeast and that we transported down there. So, really leaning into the community and culture and allowing people to see themselves in those projects. Well, I know we were talking about scale and different places in the country and in the world. You travel a great deal. And I know a lot of that is, you're traveling for work, you're visiting different museums and public spaces and cultural institutions. But when you think about, you have to fill your cup, right? You're doing all this work and you're a leader in your design organization. Like, what are the spaces or those places that really stop you in your tracks or give you inspiration or get you super excited to do the work that you do?
I'm really fortunate that the work takes me to so many different places. Like, just talking with a friend about how grateful, I just get to see so much of the world, and that the privilege of that is not lost on me. In the past year, I've been to Singapore and Lithuania and London, Paris, Berlin, Copenhagen, and then in the States, like really beautiful places like Pacific Northwest and the mountains of Utah, and like the only word I can.
So beautiful.
I know, it's
epic, right? Like Zion is epic.
Like majestic, just like being on Mars. It's really wild. And I mean, I think really, honestly, that's what stops in my track, is that sort of like awestruck feeling. And I think the scale, you're suddenly incredibly aware of your own sense of scale on the planet. Like these massive, giant, beautiful landscapes that are like totally expansive or really layered places, like, the cities that have been built up over time, like much older cities than anything you see in the States. And, I think that can be anything from like a small alley, like somewhere in Europe, which is really tight and quiet and like oddly intimate. And then places like Singapore, which are like these massive, futuristic, like fuzzy green buildings that are like kind of solar punk vibes. And, when I'm traveling back to back, because often I'm sort of like lining up a bunch of travel at once, there's like high contrast between those types of
Yeah.
spaces, like the architecture, but also the people, the cultures. And, I think that in between, it's a little bit of like, whiplash between scale and just your everyday in those different places. So that I think those moments are really where you become aware of yourself in relation to space and other people. Yeah, and I think that's what like
Yeah.
inspires me.
The textures, the smells, the quality of the light, the weather, crisp or humid, and all those things. Thinking about like the Picasso quote, I think it took his whole career to relearn how to see the world, through a child's eyes, and just being in places that we're not used to really heightens that. And I find that I start looking at details that I don't normally notice when I'm in my hometown or places that that I spend a lot of time in. It's a great way to remember to always try to see things fresh. But it's a wonderful kind of palette to draw on when you're thinking about design. And I know there's a really exciting project that will be opening soon, the Obama Presidential Center that we talked about. It certainly will become its own destination, and thinking about how all these millions of visitors will engage with this pivotal chapter of American history. I mean, I remember it so well. I took my daughter to the inauguration, and just, what a turning point it was for us as a country. But without giving away anything that we have to wait and see in person, what are you hoping people will feel in the spaces and the exhibits? Those moments where they're simply kind of sitting with just what they've experienced. And I'm sure it's probably many things depending on the size
Yeah.
and scale of that project, but maybe some of those things that you were most excited about leading it.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's crazy. It's opening so soon. It's been almost 10 years on this project. I'm actually heading out there next week to do maybe a final-ish walkthrough.
Wow.
And it's interesting to like start thinking about the in-between spaces because in some ways, you know, I don't know if I'll really see them until I see people who don't know the space yet, but I have hopes. Honestly, it's designed with a lot of beautiful in-between moments. It's so considered, both indoors and outdoors. And we spoke about transitions earlier. Like, I think every transition in this whole place has been thought through, kind of activated with art or with nature, with light or with sound. Like, it's just going to be such a holistic, beautiful experience. But I guess to focus on the museum, I guess maybe what I'm hoping for is for people to feel a sense of possibility, in these in-between moments, when they aren't engaging in the story or participating in a interactive or an experience. I think a big Obama word, as you know, is hope. And
Mhm.
maybe I'm looking for something adjacent to that. I think the content of the museum is, of course, about a specific presidency, a specific moment in history, even though history is like unfolding so fast in front of us. But I do think what's so powerful about that story is how much it connects to these kind of broader questions of participation and responsibility and collective action. We talked a lot about like the me to we arc in terms of
Mhm.
the project. So I just hope people have the space to reflect on not just what they've seen, but their own role in the world. Thought a lot about the concept of a global community when working on this
Mm.
project. And, I hope that, if someone leaves the center feeling even a small sense of that they're part of this larger community, they're part of an ongoing story, that their voice and their actions matter, that would be really, really meaningful to me.
Yeah. I mean, that was at the very beginning, such a grassroots campaign. People didn't really know who he was. And so for him to take off through kind of next generation idea of people really feeling committed, like they were a part of that, even if they never did anything, related to the campaign, but they just felt it in their hearts with that kind of like hope
Yeah.
campaign. So anyway, I can't wait to
But
see it.
translate that, translate that into whatever's happening in their backyards,
Yeah.
like I think that's the piece I hope works.
Thinking about all these different kinds of spaces that you experience and you design, what do you think brings you back to the why you do this?
I think let's see. I think that it's hard to like sort of take off my designer hat fully, all of um these places. I think the non-design moments are moments that really inspire me in a lot of ways. I guess like the moments I'm most inspired are probably really simple ones, like moments when I'm in nature. And I don't know if that's just because I've been in New York for over 25 years. I've been in the big city for a long time. I know it's kind of a boring answer, but I do think it's a space that I can kind of reset my brain. It sort of allows myself to clear my mind, and I actually think more importantly allows my mind to wander, like, which I
Mhm.
think can really feel like a luxury nowadays. Like you're just sort of next, next, next often, and so like having those moments for imagination.
For me, it's the long road trip.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
every summer, I drive to my friends in Maine and I come up with the best ideas and I'm, trying to record them in some way that isn't like a driving hazard. But
yeah,
I just feel like I need that time with nothing to do to really
yeah.
be able to have that reset.
Sun hitting your face, and yeah, I just think letting your mind wander. Like there was this like
Yeah,
funny meme about how creatives need time to do nothing, and I was like, it's so true.
it
You
is
know,
so
like
true.
we have to like let things marinate, and I think yeah, it's just really important to the process.
Okay, last question before we do something else that's a little fun. And I've been asking everyone in this series, what gives you hope now? I know we were talking a lot about hope, coincidentally, in this conversation, but have you seen something or made or experienced that tells you what design is capable of and what this moment is asking of it?
Trying to think of a more philosophical answer. I mean, honestly, I might cop out a bit and say my friends and colleagues make me really hopeful. I
Mm,
know this design community really well. I know you do too. And I
yeah.
just have a lot of trust in how people are thinking right now. I think historically, in these moments that are really complex, whether it's politically or socially, art and design, become more essential, more robust. I think many of us, many people who are probably listening to this are trusted to create spaces that have real impact and tell really important stories. And I often say RAA, like, we're telling some of the greatest stories in the world. I'm seeing people take this moment really seriously, like being thoughtful about what they make, how they make it, like what we were talking about earlier, who's making it with them. It just feels like there's more intention, not just like grabbing attention, and a real awareness that the work, that we're doing doesn't exist just for now. It's something that others will
Yeah.
inherit. So, yeah, I hope that doesn't seem like a cop out, but I really do think
No,
that
yeah.
the design field, I think the design field at its best really rises to the moment. And that's pretty inspiring.
I completely agree. I'm always so inspired by SEGD. That's why I love what I do, just because of the people. I don't know anyone that I've met since I've been in this role who just doesn't really care deeply. Like they're not just doing it for the paycheck. I mean, yes, we do need, we have to pay our bills, but they're really doing it for like they want to do the right thing on behalf of the audiences that they're serving. Okay, well, we're going to switch it up a little bit before we close out, and this is our lightning round. So just, top of your head.
Okay.
So, first question, a museum or cultural space anywhere in the world that you think is almost perfectly designed for human connection?
Perfect. Okay. Well, it's an incredibly biased answer.
Yeah.
And it's not because it's perfectly designed, but because it's the 10-year anniversary, I will always champion the African American Museum in DC. I'm just really proud of
Yeah.
the way it supports human connection. Okay, but maybe if I'm allowed to, I was just in
Yeah.
London.
Go ahead.
Just in London and the Barbican, which is like the coolest concept of all time. It's like this whole ecosystem of culture, performance spaces and galleries and library and housing, and there's this beautiful conservatory, and there's a martini bar. Like, it's all just sort of layered together. And sorry.
Those are good. Those are very good too. They're very opposites. Yeah, that's great. I mean, in some ways not.
I know.
Okay. A public space that's not a museum that desperately needs a designer's attention.
Transportation, like in the States. I just feel like it's getting better in the States. Things are starting to change, but like they're like in some ways, like the most emotional human spaces we have, but they're like,
I know,
totally designed like for, efficiency, and there's so much opportunity for unexpected connection, like, not for the experience. So there's great examples out there. We can do better.
There are great examples. I mean, I love traveling in Japan, but man, you better be on time because, that train is taken off. Okay, the most surprising space you've walked into recently where you felt awe or completely moved in an unexpected way. Maybe we talked about that, but I don't know if there's another one that...
Let's see, I'll draw from like last weekend. I was in Detroit, and I went to the Belle Isle Aquarium for the first time. Have you been there?
I haven't been there, no.
Well, there's there's this like amazing, incredibly cool like local pottery manufacturer called Pewabic, I think, and they like make these beautiful glazed tiles, and you really see their work like all over these Art Deco buildings. But I went to the aquarium for the first time. It's these huge art spaces, and it's just all this like jade green. It's gorgeous. It's like totally astonishing. And then I found out that it's the oldest aquarium in the U.S. And like every time I'm at the first of any concept, you like really like spin out about all the ideas and decisions that go into like making something for the first time. And that's just really fun to think about.
That is so fun. I know when I was at the Eames Institute, they had the model for an aquarium that never got built in Washington, D.C. that the Eames had designed and pitched, but it kind of looks like the National Aquarium in Baltimore. So I wonder if there was something there, but yeah, I completely agree. Okay. A design decision, not a design decision you are most proud of in your career. One specific choice, like not a whole project.
Okay. Hard not to always draw on African American because it is closest to my heart. I think it was the kind of ascension that we talked about, and like maybe very specifically within that design decision, this idea of like darker compressed spaces ascending into like more light and color, and doing that through materiality and graphics and lighting and all of that, because I think that decision alone does a lot of emotional work without needing like or images,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like that partie, the thesis that really sets everything apart. Something you believe about cultural institutions that most people in the field are not ready to hear.
Bah, this could be provocative. Okay. I feel like not every project needs a wow moment, needs spectacle. I think sometimes restraint is a really powerful design move. And I just, I think I hear a lot like we have to find that wow moment. And I think that can take a lot of different forms.
Completely agree. I gave a talk once and said, if I had a bucket of wows for every time a client said, where's the wow? Here's your wow. Okay. One word that describes what a great exhibition feels like when it really works.
Well, alive.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Complete the sentence. Design fails when blank.
These are really fun pop quizzes. Design fails when it becomes commoditized.
That's good. I mean, it's not good, but it's a good answer. Design succeeds when blank.
I'm a little bit of a broken record, but when it creates a genuine like emotional response, like a gut punch.
So I want to just give a moment to share, and I know there's a lot coming up at RAA. Like when you and I were talking about it, I'm like, wait, how many openings do you have? So what's on the horizon? What do you want the global audience to know about, or maybe that they could plan to go see that you've been working on?
We're so fortunate right now. I think we have close to 30 projects slated to open in 2026.
Right? How's it possible?
all different scales. It's like completely amazing. And like schedules are not perfect, so we'll see. We've talked about Obama, so I'm not going to plug that one. Maybe I'll plug two, because one
Mhm.
is next week, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center for History and Democracy. It's a long name, but it's worth saying. It's a really, really powerful project that tells like this intertwined story of Thaddeus Stevens, who was a radical abolitionist that was kind of the architect of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And then Lydia Hamilton Smith, who was a Black woman who was an entrepreneur, also his confidant and business partner. And the center itself is a kind of real site with power of place. It's his law office and home and adjacent tavern kind of connected, and then connected by this modern addition. This convention center kind of built itself around it. It's a pretty wild space. And the lower level is very likely part of the Underground Railroad. So
Oh,
this
wow.
whole experience really, connects to history and kind of bigger questions around democracy and civic responsibility today. So everyone should go, open to the public next weekend. And then I would love to give a quick shout out to the Japanese American National Museum. We've been working with them since 2020 to do a major kind of reimagining of their core exhibition. We've worked with them in the past, so they're a wonderful, incredibly
It's a great institution if people don't know it. Yeah.
top-notch class act. It opens this fall. It's in Los Angeles, and I think this institution has always been so important, Cybelle, and this next
Yeah.
chapter is really
Yeah.
about, I would say, expanding that story, connecting past to present, creating even more space for dialogue and participation and kind of more intersectionality between different communities. It's going to be really cool. So
Yeah.
a lot ahead.
Yeah. Well, I always admired that institution for the way that they did things. A lot of what we're talking about is they were able to really engage audiences in very different ways, really meaningful ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sitting here with you, I know I get to spend time with you, but it just every time I think how much this act of trust, of like trusting other people, trusting your intuition, trusting your team, trusting your clients, and also that people can hold complexity. It's okay that everything isn't tied up in a perfect little Bauhaus bow. um, and that we can sit with those things. We can sit with the awkward or the things that challenge us, and that's okay, and that will leave change more than informed. And I think that's a great evolution that the museum design world has learned, is that it's not just providing facts. We really have to give enough that people can kind of take it and translate it in ways that are meaningful to them. You notice that design holds people. It's those unexpected thresholds and surprising transitions, and it's that curiosity that makes it work. And I love that you're curious. And on behalf of SEGD and ICoD and the Global International Design Day community, just proud to share that alongside you. And thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you so much, Cybelle. This was so much fun.